As for freestyle, yeah, so I'll jump right into it because we're going to cover a lot of information. And I think freestyle has the most variation of all the strokes, and it is the most complex. And there are going to be so many questions, I know it, on very specific things. And I think the focus, as is with everything, you see variation in your pool too. The idea as a coach and as a swimmer is to narrow your stroke down to a very few priorities. And that's what I do when I talk about technique, is I have the very few things that I really like put on the pedestal, and then I develop the rest of the stroke around it. So in today's webinar, what we're going to do is we're going to cover all these different aspects. And to me, the most important one is the catch and generating propulsion. Obviously, there's so many things that are surrounding the catch and everything that goes on. And we're going to talk about how the impacts of all these different aspects. And we probably won't cover every single thing that's on your mind. But again, it comes down to what your priorities are. And for me, that priority is the catch. And we know what it looks like from the side view. I think most people do know what it looks like from a side view. And just start with the extended arm and then wrapping your arm around the water and getting your elbow bent so that your palm and your forearm are pushing water back. So bending your elbow, get your arm around the water, push water back with your palm and forearm. We all know what that looks like from the side view. And this is where the variation comes in. Every great freestyler has this to different degrees. So here you can see very evident and obvious elbow bends, but it's not always that obvious and evident. And for a sprinter, they get through this catch a whole lot quicker and their arms a little bit straighter. But I would say everyone is still trying to get water at the front of the stroke. And so that's why, while there's a lot of variation, this is still a great focus point. And again, we'll cover other aspects, but really I want to focus on this the most. So what this catch is, and you see it from the side, but this doesn't tell you how to do it. You can try all you want to bend your elbow, but if you don't get the right positions, then you're going to struggle. So I'm going to tell you how to do it. And the way to do it is by focusing on what your stroke looks like from the front view and from this view, or, obviously you can relate to it when you're swimming too. So how to do it from the hand entry, which happens in front of the shoulder. So extend your hand and rotate forward in front of your shoulder with the hand in line with the shoulder, not getting more narrow than that. Do not over rotate. I think that's a huge part of trying to get the catch. And people often emphasize the rotation in freestyle, and it can get in the way of the catch. And I'll just 100% say that. If you rotate too much, it can really interfere with your ability to get the catch. And when I say do not over rotate, I mean keep the shoulder next to the face. So you're extending forward, not rotating your shoulder all the way under your face, not so that the shoulder is rolled under in front of your face. So don't over rotate. I think mechanically it's pointing your fingertips down, getting your hand in line with, keeping your hand in line with your shoulders. So keeping your hand under the shoulder through the pull, for the first part of the pull at least, through the catch, and then bending the elbow to the side. So the elbow is wider than the shoulder. And you can see in these images, and I call it the power triangle. My best friend from high school, Coach Pete Mavro from Las Vegas Swim Club, gave me this term. Last week we talked about the triangle of space in breaststroke, and today it's the power triangle. It's all about the power triangle. So trying to form a triangle or half diamond, however you want to call it, with your shoulder, elbow, and hand, and basically forming this power triangle, hand underneath the shoulder, elbow a little bit wider. Let's look at it in action and basically look at what this power triangle looks like. And you see little bit of variation from person to person, as I talked about. Some people have their elbows a little bit wider. Let me pause this and we'll kind of step through this because I know the video doesn't play super smoothly for everybody. So hand in front of the shoulder, extending in front of the shoulder. You don't see the shoulder rolled in front of the face here. Extending, rotating forward. So key. Not having the shoulder roll in front of the face. And then from there, fingertips down and the elbow popping out to the side. You see some variation again from person to person. You have a little bit of a wider hand here. You have a little bit of a much wider elbow and hand up here. These two on the right side happen to be sprinters. So again, the catch is still important. Even for a sprinter, you have different variations. And this is more middle distance athletes. But like a lot of similarity from athlete to athlete. Again, some degree of this power triangle. If you are swimming and you can look down the entire barrel of your arm and you see kind of all the way down your arm is too straight. If you don't see your elbow popping out to the side, then you're not having the catch. So you want that elbow popping out to the side. You want to see your hand and your forearm just through the side of your eye. If you see it in front of your face, you're not getting the right catch. So hopefully this gives you some indication of what this looks like and what you're trying to achieve in the front of the stroke. Again, to me, this is the most important thing. So you're trying to shape everything else around this part of the stroke. So this is everything. Again, extend in front of the shoulder, fingertips down, elbow popping out to the side, trying to get that elbow bent. And if your elbow is bent in this way, you have the catch from that side view. It looks the way you want it to. So this is the view for everything in the catch. Everyone always asks for drills. To me, this is a great drill. And it isolates the catch. I'm gonna play this. I know it's gonna jump, but then I'll step through it. But basically, trying to keep, it's basically a skull, kind of like doggy paddle, but more than just doggy paddle. It's pretty technical. So let's look at this. It's extending in front of the shoulder. It's isolating just the underwater part of the stroke. So extending in front of the shoulder and then getting the power triangle. And you can see the power triangle from above water. And yeah, this arm the elbow's coming a little bit higher, but that's not the point of it. The point of it is just the underwater motion and extending forward, pivoting forward, and then hitting that catch right here. You have this, and you are hitting the catch. You're getting everything that you want. So again, the key is rotating forward, fingertips down, elbow popping out to the side. It sounds so simple, and again, but I think there are things that interfere with the catch, and we're gonna talk about that, one of those things. And rotation has always been a huge part of freestyle teaching in the US at least. And I would like to change that narrative to be rotating forward. It's not about rotating to the side and rotating all the way onto your side. And I'll talk about this graphic. And basically, you look at these athletes, and these are some of the best freestylers in US history, and this is their maximum rotation. And you're talking 25 to 35 degrees rotated down from the surface. What does that mean? So 45 degrees is rotated halfway between being on your stomach and on your side. 90 degrees is all the way on your side. They're rotated less than 45 degrees, which means that they are more on their stomach than they are on their side. You're trying to stay more on your stomach, you're on your side. You're trying to rotate forward, as I've been trying to say. And remember that with rotation, or the whole stroke, the catch is the goal, generating propulsion. And I know there was at one point a narrative where you rotate onto your side and you create less drag, and that is just not true. Like, I promise you that is not true. You rotate on your side, there's still the same amount of your body that is submerged under the water. Your buoyancy doesn't change. So you're gonna be creating as much drag if you're all the way on your side, or if you're still rotating your stomach just a little bit. And so the whole thing is the catch is the goal, and too much rotation makes it hard to get your elbow bent to the side. As I said, a big part of the catch is bending your elbow out to the side, wider than your hand and your shoulder. And if you're rotated all the way on your side, it is really hard to bend your elbow out to the side. To me, and I'll talk about that in the next slide, is how rotation interferes with it, but it actually can be part of injury mechanics too. And so I think we need to be really careful with how we talk and teach rotation. You've heard me use it a little bit already, is that I use the term pivot, and we're pivoting forward, and it's not this long, slow rotation. You're just getting from one side to the other in a short little bursts and extending forward. You're rotating as much as you need to just to extend forward and get a good reach, but not necessarily all the way onto your side. So talking about those injury mechanics, swimming obviously I think is in some ways synonymous. People think of it as with shoulder injuries and think it's just in terms of repeated motion over time will cause injury, but it's more so repeated bad mechanics over time. And yes, you may have some athletes that are genetically predisposed to maybe having some weak shoulders, but I think you need to look at every single athlete's mechanics when they might be experiencing shoulder pain and when these issues might be happening. So I think, and I'm going to talk about what these mechanics are, and to me, rotation does have something to do with it. Injuries in the shoulder are definitely more likely to happen when your arm is bent behind the line of your back, behind the line of your shoulders. So if you're reaching behind your back at any point with your arm and you're putting stress on the shoulder, that over time is what can create some stress. The places where this can happen in the stroke. During the catch, if the swimmer is rotated too much, it looks like this image. And this image that you see on the screen, where you have the line of the back and then you have the arm bent behind the body and bending behind the line of the back, that puts stress on the shoulder. And over time, that's going to cause issues. And I would say, like, it very often happens during a breath when somebody's over-rotated and trying to hit that catch. But it happens when people just are taught to rotate way too much. And then it can also happen during recovery. The arm bending behind the back. If the swimmer is too narrow with the hand, and this could be in a high elbow recovery or in a straight arm recovery. If the hand is too narrow above the arm or just too close to the shoulder, that's when your arm is going to bend behind the back and you can have some injury mechanics. But basically, hopefully relating the catch to the rotation and the rotation to possible injury. And then also how throwing your arm behind your body in the recovery can also lead to this, or the hand being too narrow. So moving on to the arm recovery, I'll show what this looks like. And to me, this is important for many different reasons. From proper mechanics to just setting up the next stroke and setting up the next catch. So you watch these athletes, and this is from the front view. And you see the arm recovering over the water. And I'll play this all the way to the entry. Right here. Enter in front of the shoulder and extend in front of the shoulder. But let's look at the entry and the motion and where it is and where it takes place. And then I'll point some things out. So the hand is relaxed. I think that the recovery motion is a dynamic throw of the hand forward. And I think the hand needs to be to the side and needs to come around to the side, not keeping it narrow. And again, talking about how the narrow hand can lead to some shoulder stress, but then how it also, like having the wide hand can lead to a great dynamic throw forward. So wide, not narrow. In the high elbow stroke, the hand is bent downward from the elbow and out to the side of the elbow. So you can see that right here, forming a triangle with the surface at the midway point. So the hand is out to the side it's not a narrow recovery, which I think, you know, we talk about fingertip drag, and as it used to be a very popular drill, I think it still is in many places. And in fingertip drag, where your hand is coming up the side of your body, you do that on land. I do that right here, and it puts stress on my shoulder. And that's what's going to happen over time if you're doing that in the water. So any type of fingertip drag drill should be done with a much wider hand out to the side. That is what our best athletes are doing, and that is what the recovery actually looks like. And then a straight arm, if you wanted to go a straight arm recovery, you see that in the bottom right corner right here. And then the straight arm recovery, the hand is just extended out from the lower part of the arm out to the side. It's not a super high behind your body straight arm recovery. And that, I think, is an important distinction. Again, just trying to be mobile. And if you're only rotating 20 to 30 degrees under the water, you're only rotating 20 to 30 degrees above the water. And so your arm is going to be at this maybe a little bit taller than 20 to 30 degrees, but you're like this part of the arm from the surface, yeah, it's still a little bit more of an acute angle, not anywhere close to 90 degrees rotated up. So again, keep the hand wide, throw the hand forward along the surface, and this is the actual motion of what is happening in the recovery. So let me step through this one more time. Hand is swinging out to the side. You see that right here. The elbow's coming out, the hand is starting to swing out to the side, come around the water, out to the side, and then throw the hand forward from there. Let's take a different look at what this recovery looks like. I think this is really important because I think what I see is recoveries that are way too narrow, way too often. And I think it starts at the younger level, and what our notion and understanding of what the recovery looked like. So sticking with these 2 points, or these few points, the hand is wide. The hand actually is leading the elbow about halfway through the recovery. And think about shooting the hand forward. Now, we have at the Olympic Training Center, we have this luxury of having this catwalk where we can walk above the pool, and I can take video and pictures of what athletes are doing from this view. And it's awesome. And it's really taught me a lot. And I'll play this once. And again, knowing that some people, the video would be choppy and skippy. So I'll step through it and take a look. You can see what these athletes, where their hands are coming around. They're coming around to the side. The hand is not staying narrow right next to the body. The hand is coming out to the side and swinging around to the side of the body. And then right here, about halfway through, you see these athletes on the right with the high elbow recovery. They have the classic high elbow. The hand actually starts leading the way, and the hand is in front of the elbow at this point. I guarantee you, these are the athletes that you were trying to teach your athletes to swim like, and this is what their recovery looks like. Again, halfway through. So this is the point where in the previous slide, you saw that triangle that the athlete's arms was making with the water, surface of the water. And you see right here, the hand is leading the way in this motion right here. And then the hand is shooting forward. Super interesting. And then you'll see it with the next stroke too. So hand is swinging around to the side. And then the hand starts leading the way in this recovery, and then you shoot it forward. Shoot it forward into that forward entry, into that forward rotation. Everything is about moving things forward. The athlete all the way on the left here has a little bit more of a straighter arm, and you can kind of see it's still, that straight arm recovery is still out to the side. And then same thing right here. Out to the side on the straight arm recovery right here. So there you go. I mean, hopefully this gives you some insight as to understanding what the recovery should look like. I think it's all set up You know, if you're trying to make your hand too narrow, you're rotating too much and it interferes with the catch. So everything ties back to the catch. And that's why I'm talking about this aspect. Let's talk about the finish, and then we're going to move on to kicking, and we're going to move on to breathing, and then we're going to move on to some body connection, and then that's it. So after the catch and after the power triangle, what is happening here? So I'll play this through. So here's your catch and your power triangle. So the catch, power triangle. So now you're past the catch. What is happening here? And to me, the hand comes a little bit closer to the body in terms of depth. So it comes a little bit closer, and then it comes a little bit more narrow too. I think you're trying to keep pressure on the forearm and palm at all times, but it kind of starts, you see that the arm starts to bend, and the arm starts to bend and the elbow starts, I would say, bending towards your feet. But again, the focus, if you want to give your athlete a cue, it's keeping pressure on your hand and your forearm through this finish as your hand gets a little bit more narrow. And here we go. So keeping pressure on the hand and forearm right there. You can see that the hand and forearm is still pushing water back. You see the way that the elbow is bent too. And just naturally, just like in fly, and backstroke, like when your hand passes your shoulder, when your arm passes your shoulder, you kind of have to reorient your arm so that you can keep pressure in that backwards direction. And then let's look at how the arm finishes. And at the finish, the elbow is the first thing to exit. It's interesting. I do know that the finish is such an easy, teachable, coachable part of the stroke. But I would say not trying, like you don't want to overemphasize the finish, just like you don't want to over rotate. Like locking out your elbow, locking out your arm in a straight position so that your hand finishes next to your thigh with your arm straight can lead to a bunch of things. It can lead to over rotating on the other side. It just doesn't lead to that flowy motion that you're trying to get in the recovery, which I talked about in the previous slide. So I think yes, like the way that I talk about all these things is way more complex because it's not rotating onto your side. It's not locking your elbow at the finish. But these are the things that are technically correct and the goal that you're trying to get to. And if you're not teaching this stuff at a younger age, what point in the stroke, what point in an athlete's age progression are they going to learn these things so that they can swim properly? So yeah, if you want to teach rotating all the way into your side, just make sure somewhere in your team's progression that there is some proper recorrection to that teaching. So again, like after the catch, the elbow starts to bend a little bit more, and then pushing water back with your palm and forearm. And I see this is not just this athlete, this is so many athletes in terms of pushing water back and in terms of the way the hand bends and the elbow exiting first. I see that with so many of our best athletes. I wish I could spend so much more time on all these aspects, but just we have to keep moving with the limited time. So kicking mechanics, and this might be mundane to some people, and most people think of kicking and flutter kicking as you get better just with repeated motion. And yes, there's some improvement curve with just repeated motion, but the best athletes have superior technique at kicking. The best kickers on your team do have different technique, and I've spent so much time studying that. So we're going to take a look at that, and I'm going to talk about that. It all starts with bending the knee forward. So I'm just going to step right through this. So we're looking at the kick of the leg that's closest to us. So the right leg in all these athletes. So it starts with bending the knee forward. And you see that with all these athletes and where their knee is, it's in front of the body right here. It's less than 90 degrees. I'd say like it's similar to how much you bend your knee when you're walking. So like you don't really think about it, but you're not bending your knee that much, but it's still bending forward. Your knees are bending forward when you're walking, and that's where the kick starts. The lower leg then extends forward while the knee stays in place. So you pick one of these athletes, and as I step forward through this, you'll see that their knee stays in the same place while their leg will bend, while the rest of their leg bends forward. So the knee stays in place and the leg bends forward. They basically throw water down off of their toes. But you don't see the knee lifting upward. The knee stays in place. So the knee bends forward and then the rest of the leg kicks. And an extension happens from where that place the knee is. The kick finishes before the leg starts to rise again. And I think that is the key, is that you don't start lifting the knee and lifting the leg until that full extension happens. But notice how deep this kick is. It is a lot below the body line of these athletes. And I've heard, you know, one of the major teaching cues in the US that I've heard for so long has been, oh, the kick is too deep. I've never honestly seen a kick that's too deep. If it's too, like, I just never have. If it is moving, if the legs are moving too fast enough, then I'm okay with working with that. You need to feel resistance on your leg. And obviously, like, you have kicks that are too deep that are also moving really slow motion. And obviously you're not pushing water at that point either. So, like, let's say, so now is when the leg starts to rise back up to the surface. So let's come back and step through this again. Again, the knee bending forward, just like as much as you were walking, and then holding the knee down to finish the kick. Kickers that aren't as good, we all know what that looks like. It looks like a bicycle kick. It doesn't look, and basically what's happening is that the feet are staying high and pushing water back instead of throwing water down. That is what bicycle kicking is. They're not throwing water down off their toes. It's the knee starts bending upward as they start extending instead of the knee staying down at this point. Hopefully that makes sense. The kick, and like I said, the kick finishes below the body line. I'm gonna play this through again in case some people can see the kick, see this video play fully, but hopefully everyone through me stepping through it could get some kind of understanding of what this kick action looks like. And then I'm gonna move on to breathing. This is seriously like a crash course in all the strokes, because I'm used to talking like at least an hour or 45 minutes on all of these strokes and using multiple examples. So this is really, really interesting. Breathing messes everything up. So we're gonna talk about breathing, really, really important. And in the breath, what's important isn't so much the mechanics are important for sure, but the timing will allow you to have the best mechanics. So the best breath the reason to have a good breath is so that your non-breathing arm catch can be really good. Again, it all comes back to the catch. And so the reason to have a good breath is to have the non-breathing arm catch great. It also doesn't slow down the rhythm of the stroke. And the whole thing is you need to have it timed well. And it's not just about having it quick. It's about starting it early enough. Most people are turning it too late. It's a turn of the neck that starts before the non-breathing arm entry. So you see this arm recovering right here, and we'll see when these athletes are turning their head. And the head is starting to turn before the hand is entering. And then the head is in the breath by the time the hand is entered. And then it snaps back during the breathing arm recovery. So again, I'll step through this real quick. So your head will snap back during the recovery, not at the finish. And you see both these athletes have their head turned back more than and they're only halfway through this recovery. So it's not just a quick breath. It is quick, but the reason why it's quick is because they started it early and they finished it early. And that is the key to a good breath, is good timing. It's a turn of the neck that starts before the hand enters and finishes before that breathing arm recovery finishes. Hopefully that makes sense. Hopefully you guys were able to see this. I already see them coming up on 30 minutes, so I'm gonna speed right through the end of this. I think it's really important. I'm not gonna speed through it that fast. The head leads the rotation. And it'll, oftentimes I've heard that the head and body will rotate together. to me, and everything I've seen with a good breath, the head snaps before the rotation. And I think a good key for underwater, so we'll take a look at this. So we'll see when they start the breath, and the head, these athletes, their head is turning as their hand is entering. But more importantly, because the key to a good breath is the non-breathing arm catch, so the right arm in this case, trying to snap your head back so that you can almost see the catch of the stroke. Trying to snap the head back quickly so that you can almost see this catch. And you see it right here, that their head is turning back as they're catching, and you don't see their other arm entering yet. And most people wait for that. And this is good breath timing. So snapping the head back. You know, and to be honest, like people often ask, at what point, like what age is it appropriate for to learn this? And I think is like with all this stuff, it is actually really hard to learn it as a senior athlete. So the earlier you can teach it, the better. Obviously, you need to have other foundations of the stroke down, but the breath is such an important part of the stroke. So most swimmers are too late in their breath. Start the breath. The breath needs to start with the entry, before the entry of the non-breathing arm. And most athletes start it with the entry. So you can see this athlete right here, like entering, and then still with that entry and extension forward, the head is turning forward into that breath. So basically using that entry to rotate and get the breath. And then it needs, most swimmers are too late, and then they turn their head back as their arm is crossing in front of their face. And again, you need to do that earlier. It needs to be a forced motion. You see that the catch is well already past the catch in this point. The athlete is still breathing. This is not a strong stroke because your head is turned out to the side and you're trying to put power on that right arm right there if you're breathing to the left. And then the head doesn't turn back until right here. This is too late. It's not a good breath. It's not that right arm catch for this athlete is compromised and not as strong. And that is the difference between these athletes and the athletes in the slide before. Hopefully you guys can see the difference. I'm going to zoom through these last two strokes again, like I'm already at 30 minutes. So I think this is important, and this kind of like brings everything together, connects everything if you must. This is what the advanced and our national team athletes understand and do so well. It's swimming connected. And I know this is a pretty hard concept to get in video, but like it's not just the arms and it's not just the legs, it's not just the breath, it's not all these things. Like you got to bring it together and get the most out of your stroke and the rotation with having a tight core. And basically we'll play this through, and that the catch on one side, basically the two sides of the stroke are working together. And you see the catch, the right arm catch right here is helping drive that left arm recovery and helping drive that recovery side forward. And that right here, this is being connected. So hopefully the arrows give you an understanding of what is happening here and understanding what that connection is. And this is what, like I said, this is 2.0. So after you have all the mechanics down, like how do you connect everything across your body? And this is the thing to think about. It's connecting the catch with the recovery side, but then also connecting the finish with the entry. And you see that right here. So the finish right here will help drive that entry forward. Again, it's forward, not down. So pushing water back, rotating that side up will help the entry side. And hopefully that makes sense. And that happens through, again, being connected and having a really tight core. Again, this is a little bit more of an advanced concept, but something that like will take your swimming to another level if you have all those mechanics right. And I love these last two videos just in understanding how this motion just like drives everything forward. And hey, that's it. So again, thank you for these last couple weeks. We will take questions if there are any that are outstanding and we want to answer on the spot. We could take like 2 or 3 questions. And as Sydney mentioned in the beginning, we do our best to respond to all the questions that remain unanswered and respond individually or post them on the website. So hopefully you guys continue to check back as to what the resources are and see if your questions get answered, but we do our best to take care of that. So any questions I will answer live. It looks like Mark is ready to maybe cue some up.
Yeah, Russell, we had a couple questions on the hand position in the stroke. One about whether the thumb should be separated from the other fingers, and then another one about how fast should your arm enter the water.
So talking about good questions. Thanks, Mark, for passing those on. Thumb position, hand position in general. Like, I think your hand needs to be relaxed. So like thumb is out to the side. If your hand is relaxed, I think there needs to be some space. I mean, research has shown that like having some space in between your fingers. Okay, obviously you don't want them spread really far apart, but if you have them, if you have your hand relaxed instead of stiff, like super stiff, that just doesn't lead to the best mechanics and the best motion. I've seen so many of our national team athletes, and these are some of the best freestylers in the world, like having hands in really weird positions, and it just shows how relaxed they are through their hand. So not having a stiff hand is really important. And you know, ideally, I think you don't have those weird positions, but you have your fingers straight, have some space in between, a little bit of space, and then having your thumb out to the side. In terms of the speed that your hand is entering, I think, like, you know, it's the finish of that dynamic throw forward. So I think you will have some speed at the entry of the stroke, because that speed is the culmination. And you know, going back to being connected, if you're holding water at the finish of the stroke and then driving this arm forward, you should have some acceleration into that part of the stroke. And so, yes, like ideally it's not just a relaxed entry, you're shooting it forward. And again, it comes down to the connected motion. It comes down to setting up that forward rotation and getting your hand and shoulder in the right place so that you can get that catch. And being dynamic in that entry is really important part of it. Thanks, Mark.
Awesome. Thanks, Russell. We had a bunch of questions about breathing patterns, whether it's better to breathe every 2 or every 3, and how to decide what the best breathing pattern is. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, so breathing pattern, I think, is good in general to practice and to obviously understand. You have to breathe in a race. So you have to, you know, it's, you know, some 50 freestylers, people don't breathe, but every other race you have to breathe. So, you know, breathing is the cause of so many mechanical flaws. So having a breathing pattern is really important. But I think more important than that is understanding what those flaws are so that when you do breathe, you can fix them. And so that's why I tried to explain the breathing timing and the breathing mechanics. I think making your breath better in addition to having a breathing pattern is important. But in terms of breathing pattern, most athletes at the elite level are breathing mostly to one side, because most people have a side that is good and a side that isn't as good. And I think in a race, you need to focus on that breathing on the side that is good. In workouts, most athletes that I know are training to breathing to both sides of the stroke. Again, you're doing so many repeated motion in practice that having breathing on both sides just helps balance the load a little bit on your arms and your shoulder. But again, it's understanding what the mechanics are and trying to make that better too. So in a race, most people are breathing to one side, and I would say maintaining like breathing every 2-4, breathing every 2-2-4. You know, throwing in some non-breaths is always good in terms of centering and balancing your stroke, because you know, with too much breathing and getting sloppy, you'll rotate a lot. And that's something that I probably missed and probably should have covered a little bit more, is that when you take that breath, there is a tendency to rotate that shoulder way down low, and that is a time when you need to think about your timing and think about where that shoulder is and what that catch is able to do. Yeah, so hopefully everyone sticks around to hear that part of it.
All right, one more for me. What's your opinion of the galloping stroke?
Yeah, and you see this a lot. I mean, so many of the best athletes in history have had this gallop. So like a little bit of an uneven rhythm, and you see that. And it's just a natural rhythm to their stroke, and they can ride out their stroke. I would say, like, if that's natural to somebody, you can let it happen. I think the thing is you need to have a good catch on both arms. You need to make sure you have a good kick, because when you gallop, you're usually riding on one side. So you need to have a good kick so that you can maintain speed during while you're leaning on that side. I'm not opposed to it, but you have to understand that the gallop isn't what make people go fast. It's the mechanics that are underwater that are happening. It's a good breath, it's good kick, it's a good catch on both arms. So I'm not opposed to that timing. Should everybody be doing it? Absolutely not. I love people experimenting and trying it, but it's definitely not for everybody. And you see athletes, successful athletes, also not have a gallop. You know, if you're gonna copy something, don't copy, like, you don't have to copy everything unique. Most people copy those unique things. And it's good to try, but it's not necessary for everybody. And I think you need to recognize that when it's not for you. So thanks, Mark. I don't know if we'll answer any other questions live. Otherwise, Sydney can close it out and has a few reminders before we all adjourn.